Hi, Rebecca. It's so great to connect today. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Nate, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me.
You've had such a productive career, and as you think back on the things you've learned from your work, what lesson have you learned that you would most want to pass on to others?
Oh, I just get to have one.
Yeah, you can do a couple. You can do three or four. It's up to you.
Okay.
This is your show.
Okay. So the first lesson is just so obvious and so hard to implement, which is focus, focus, focus. I spent a significant chunk of my career working with organizations that could not change because they were so overloaded. There was just no slack in the system to think about doing new things. I remember working with one firm where we were mapping all the things they were investing in and what the time frame on those projects were. And the projects, they had a 2-year product introduction cycle. And so you'd think if you're going to introduce new products, you have to be investing, 2 years in advance. And something like 95% of their resources were focused on products coming out in the next 3 months. And so they never did the long-term stuff. And because they never did the long-term stuff, they did it badly when they did it. And so
Yeah.
they were always playing catch up. So they were always playing fixes. And I nearly wrote a book on this. We got a book contract with a co-author called Stuck about how taking on too much stuff keeps you stuck. But of course, we didn't write it because we were overloaded.
That's great. It reminds me of something I learned that, this is especially challenging as we have more resources because the more resources we have, the more opportunities we have, right? The more paths and options we have to pursue. And
Yeah.
the success can therefore lead to our lack of success or lack of focus.
Well, and I sometimes say the great advantage of being an entrepreneur with no money is that you have no money.
Yeah.
So you have to focus, right? You have no slack. You can't try, oh, let's try this and let's do that and let's do. No, you have to do one thing and you have to do it really well. And that's an incredible secret weapon.
How do you try to apply this in your personal life to focus, focus, focus?
Ah, I try and be really, really choiceful about how I spend my time. And I try and be very clear what the single thing I'm trying to get done this week is, or this day, or this meeting. And I try and revisit, and I constantly fail. And I try and be kind to myself when I fail.
Yeah. So, okay, focus, focus, focus. Sounds like you got a few lessons then.
You mean in addition to focus,
In
focus,
addition to
focus?
focus, 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 or do you have more you want to say about focus, focus,
No,
focus?
I have another lesson.
Great.
So the second lesson is change is hard, but it's always so much more worthwhile than you think it's going to be. And I'm sure you've talked to other people about status quo bias.
You will actually be the first. I think I talked about it in one of the early monologues. I did, but briefly. So you'll be one of the first guests to talk about the status quo bias. That was years ago.
Oh my goodness. So I've spent a good chunk of my career working with large organizations who claim that they want to do new things or do things differently and don't. So I worked with Nokia when they were trying to respond to Apple. I worked with Kodak when they were transitioning to
Wow.
digital. I worked with Motorola when, they had what was the prototype of the first smartphone, but
Yeah.
decided not to invest in it. I mean, that's me. Like big organizations not changing. That was me for 20 years. And what I learned is the reasons for doing nothing can seem intensely compelling. They are, in rough order, nothing is really changing. We don't need to change. I don't believe you. So it's so easy because you're doing this one thing to not be aware of your cognitive biases about no, 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 new stuff is happening. I mean, trying to persuade Nokia that Apple was actually a real thing, that was very hard. So that's the first problem. It's not happening. Second problem, okay, maybe it is happening, but we can't make any money. And and here there's a kind of fundamental structural mistake, which is best illustrated by Kodak. Kodak at the height of their success, people used to say of them, there's nothing more profitable that's legal. That's because Kodak had spent many, many years, like 100 years,
Mhm.
investing in co-specialized assets to their strategy. So why was Kodak making so much money? Because to make conventional film, you ran film across rollers at about 30 miles an hour, putting down layers of chemicals at a millimeter tolerance, less than millimeter tolerances, in the dark. No one else on the planet mastered that except Fuji Xerox. And so it was no surprise that Xerox was making tons of money. But
Mhm.
if that's your margin and you look around and you look at anything else you could put money into, it's going to look less profitable because you haven't learned how to do it. You haven't made the investments necessary to make it efficient and fast and tuned. And so the we will make less money test is a disaster. And that's really stymied a whole bunch of firms that I've worked with. And then the third question is, okay, so it's not going to work. We won't make any money. And then the third thing is, we'll never be able to get it done. And that's related to the overload problem, but it's also related to the fact that you kind of have an intuition that you've spent years playing golf, and now I'm going to ask you to play soccer, and we're like not going to be very good at that. And so firms consistently underinvest in new experiments, in trying new things, in keeping themselves flexible. And this seems obvious, but it's a huge problem. I mean, you see giant organizations that can grind themselves into the ground because they don't move in new directions effectively.
So I love this lesson, and one of my favorite phrases is the only constant is change. And I was thinking about I went to law school, and I was surprised. So going in, I was kind of like, well, all we need is old law school texts. We're going to learn like con law and property because the law doesn't really change. Like nothing new ever happens. And then I get to law school and it's like, oh my gosh, there are interesting legal questions coming up every second in the world. And to it just like opened my eyes. Like there is so much change happening. We can't even keep up with we can't, it's not only about adapting to the change, it's even being able to identify the change is so difficult. So I think it's important to first adopt this understanding mindset that okay, things are changing. And then, okay, maybe it's happening, but we can't make money off it. Of course, you're obviously very familiar with and thought about the Clayton Christensen innovator's dilemma, right? Like there are good reasons that good arguments people make for why they shouldn't go into some of these markets. But if we don't change and if we're afraid and we just think we can't get it done, one, that's not very exciting. I would way rather be innovating and growing than just trying to extract. It also reminds me of a lesson from Ravan Jesuthasan, a futurist that works at Caltech. And one of his piece of advice was always seek to reinvent yourself. And I think that's important not only at a personal level, but also as a company level because there is so much change. It's more exciting. And we will eventually lose if we just try to always stay the same.
And the nuance I would add to what you just said is it's not that you can stop doing the stuff you're doing, and the stuff you're doing really well is the base that allows you to innovate. But it's being very conscious about the split in resources and people and attention between those two activities and understanding they're really significantly different.
Yeah, so it's interesting. As you say that, it makes me realize the first and the second lesson are more related than we might think because the first lesson is focus, 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 right? And somebody could say, okay, well, we're just going to focus on, we're Kodak, so we're just going to focus on film, or we're Razor, so or we're Motorola, we really nailed the Razor phone, so we're just going to do the Razor.
Right.
And you're saying, no, don't do that. Like, still, we got to like focus on what we're good at while also figuring out how to keep growing and expanding. So I guess, I mean, that's one reason why this is obviously difficult because trying to strike that balance is there's probably no easy answer.
Oh, for sure not. Anything easy, people are already doing. That's
Yeah.
that's that's why the leadership lessons are all around the hard stuff.
Yeah, that's great. And even if it's so, one of my favorite phrases is from General Admiral McCraven, and he says, "Leadership is simple, but it's hard." Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, right? And so I think you're definitely hitting on that. Okay, anything else you would like to share,
Yes, I have another lesson.
right?
And so my third lesson is trust and relationships are much more important than you think they are. And this comes from my work with Professor Robert Gibbons at MIT. We got super interested in why firms have so much trouble building what we might call high performance work environments. And there's lots of things that go into a high performance work environment, but one of the most important things is, wait for this, treating people with dignity and respect and trusting them. And when you look at the data and the research and you understand the underlying psychological mechanisms, you're like, why doesn't everyone run firms like this? I mean, not only is it much more fun because you're treating your employees like human beings rather than cogs in the machine, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest you have much more flexibility. These firms are much more agile. They're much better at communicating internally. I mean, there's this wonderful finding in economics that in the average industry, the 10% most productive firms are more than twice as productive as the least 10%. That is, with the same inputs, they produce more than twice the output. I spent years in windowless conference rooms trying to make this result go away because mainstream economists hated it so much. They hated the idea that management practice, that leadership could make so much difference. But it absolutely does. I mean, the data is very clear on this. And so then the interesting question is, why doesn't everyone manage that way? And I think this is the leadership lesson, is that in the short term, it's always tempting to take the shortcut. You know, just on a one-to-one basis, it's tempting just to go transactional, do it for me, as opposed to, well, how are you feeling today? You know,
Mhm.
what's up with you? Every time you stop to treat someone as a human being, it takes a little bit more time. And it's always tempting because many managers, you'll be shocked by this, think they're smarter than the people they're managing. So it's always tempting to say, just do it this way, just do it that way. And of course, if you're going to run a high trust organization, a big part of that is trusting the people you work for, who work for you, to try it out for themselves, to distribute the power so that they can find out, whoa, that didn't work, but let's try this. Of course, if you can do that, you mobilize all these people thinking and working for you. And if you can combine that with authentic meaning and purpose, and this is why we're doing this, you're playing a totally different game from a firm that's managing people as cogs, and it's like, we're making money for investors, put your head down and don't answer back. And and put that way, you'd think, well, yeah, I want to manage high trust, but it takes focus.
Yeah.
You have to decide you're going to do that, and it takes emotional work. You have to become self-conscious enough not to fall into the shortcuts and to be more vulnerable and more open. And, you know, we live in a culture which stresses getting stuff done and almost wants us to be robots, right?
Yeah.
Which is, you know, don't get tired, don't get angry, don't need love, just do it, just do it, just do it. And we don't have much time for being and connecting, and it can feel self-indulgent. Um, and I think what I've learned from my research is, you know, falling under the spell of just operating in that fast, do it, I'm a machine mode is really, really dangerous. It's dangerous to you. It's dangerous to the people you're with. And I'm coming to believe this is like my last lesson, and it's kind of a grand lesson. I think it's dangerous for us, for the society, and for the world. Because I think if we're managing ourselves as if we're robots, we start thinking everybody else is a robot.
Yeah.
And even that the natural world is just like something to be cut down and bought and sold. And we're kind of missing the point. So that's my last lesson.
Okay, so I'll try to be brief. I got so many things. Daniel Kahneman said something about one of the lessons that he thought was most interesting that he learned was the thing you're thinking about right now is not as important as you think it is. And so I think of that in terms of like, you know, I'm at Disneyland and I see something and I want to buy it. And then I get home like a week later, I'm like, who cared about that thing, right? So I think that's what he's getting at. But I have thought about what he said, and I think that's generally true, except for when it comes to people. I think people are more important than we realize. And uh, one of the examples I think of, I learned from Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Stephen Covey, and he wrote a book, The Speed of Trust.
Right.
And the example he shares in there that stuck out to me and still sticks with me is uh, every day 2 million people fly. And every day, those people essentially waste an hour or two getting to the airport super early to go through security because the airlines don't trust us and we don't trust each other to not take weapons onto the plane or bombs onto the plane or whatever. And I think that does such a good job of illustrating how much waste is in the system when people don't trust each other and we go transactional. We say, okay, fine, we'll have this other firm manage this transaction. But if we only trusted and cared about each other and were able to connect with each other, we would be able to eliminate that waste. And then just the final thing I was thinking here is so much of this sounds like long-term thinking. When we prioritize the short term, we take shortcuts, treat people like robots. In the short run, that can work. But really, one of my favorite sayings is all self-help can be boiled down to think long term. And that's
Yes.
another thing that I'm kind of hearing from you.
I'm sorry. That's exactly right. Yeah. Is we're tempted to reach for the easy thing, the quick thing, the quick fix, and love and joy and even profitability lie in thinking long term. Yeah.
Rebecca, this was so great. I really appreciate your time. I love these lessons. I look forward to listening to this episode again, sharing it with the students and others. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for doing this, Nate. It's been a pleasure. Take care.